Hello and welcome to Teaching My Cat to Read, the very serious book review podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Em.
And I'm Lottie. And this week we're discussing everything about The Throne of Jade by Naomi Novik.
It only took us how many series to get to the second book in this series?
It's been 84 years.
Oh, man. And to think we made like three full episodes, well, no, 2 full episodes and a baby about the first book before we ever got round to the sequel. One of many sequels.
They're quite different, though.
They are quite different, yeah.
Like, tonally, they're quite different books, I think.
Do we want to kick off a terrible summary before we dive deep on the...
What's your guys' summaries?
Sad men on boats. Which is also my Tumblr tag for the terror.
I came quite close to that. I've got hell is being on a boat with people who hate you, which is about 50% of this book, is just being on a boat with... And lots of different people hating you for different reasons and at different times.
With varying levels of validity.
Yes. I also have Whoops, My Dragon's an Anarchist, but I think we that was also a summary for the first one. I think that's just Temeraire the series.
I was trying to think of something. I was like, how would I summarise this book? And I kind of feel it'd be like London, boat, China. That's kind of how I would summarise this book, because
it's got a bit of that walk thing, hasn't it? Except it's boat.
It does. I feel we need to just start the discussion of can we compare like the book structure of this versus the first book and what you guys thought of it, because to be honest, I got a bit bored of the boat bits in the middle.
It was a slog.
I read Temeraire. I listened to this on audiobook. I don't know how much of a difference that made, but like I felt if I had been reading it, that would be the bit I would have skim read, because I'm like, they're still on a boat. They're still on a boat. they're still on a boat.
I did finish this in one day, I think. Maybe I don't know. Which is what I normally do with the books that we do for the podcast. Is I just I sit down and I blast through them. But it did feel like we were on the boat for an eternity. And lots of stuff happens, but it doesn't feel like stuff is happening. It's weird.
But it's also, I mean, like, so much, that was actually the thing that kind of struck me, because this was a reread for me. And the thing that kind of struck me this go around was I remembered nothing happening in the boat bit. And like a fuck ton of stuff happens in the boat bit.
Yeah, a lot happens.
There's assassinations. There's lots and lots of really, tense diplomatic relations.
You know, there's almost a mutiny on 3 different occasions.
Yeah, you've got dragon people and boat people on the boat, but it's a dragon boat, so it's like they're both kind of like dogs in the mirror, going are you know? Yeah, yeah.
There is feral cat circling for position and who owns this boat? Whose boat is this actually?
Riley is the captain, but only because Lawrence wrote to him and said, "Hey, do you want to be the captain of this boat? I reckon you could get that command right now if you wanted it." Yeah. So it's lots and lots of very tense, complex relationships of obligation and sort of respect and
that's even without the whole, hey, there's a whole Chinese embassy on here, and we found out about a week into the voyage that they literally commandeered 4 British ships to get here in the first place, and implied that they've mistreated the captain of one of them pretty severely in order to get him to agree to ferry them halfway around the world. So, which immediately puts basically all of the Brits are like, what if we killed you, actually? And the Chinese are just sitting there going, that was a perfectly normal thing to say. Why does everybody look like they want to stab us all of a sudden? That's so weird.
Yeah. Perhaps sad men on boats is actually a bad summary. It should be angry men on boats.
It's deeply seething and resentful men on boats.
I feel there's poor children on boats, because half of the people in the rigging are 12-year-olds. That's angry adult men on a boat.
Yeah. So the premise here is at the end of the last book, we found out that Temeraire is an extremely rare, only sort of type of dragon that is only reserved for the family of the Emperor of China. And somehow this egg ended up on a ship bound for Napoleon, and then the Brits took it, and that's how we have Temeraire. And now there's a Chinese embassy, including the brother of the Emperor, who want Temeraire to come back to China and for Lawrence to disappear. Because it's very inconvenient that this incredibly rare dragon has been harnessed by a sort of low-born peasant, etc., who's not even the Emperor of England. And it's a whole thing. And one of the things about the first book that's really lovely is Lawrence and Temeraire's relationship is like rock solid throughout, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like you never doubt that they are ride or die for each other. And then this book, it's never that that's not true, but it's more fraught. And so the whole thing feels so much more fragile and scary. Yeah. Because you don't know if they're going to be okay.
That's a really good point. I hadn't put my finger on that as being, because, I mean, as we've said, you know, everything always happens so much. There's so much shit going down and it's all quite fucked up. Lawrence is having the worst fucking time.
The core of the discomfort in this book is them renegotiating their relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a rock solid foundation in the first book that you know, you're comfortable in it. You're right. You take it for granted almost.
They'll get through anything together. And now it's like, well, will they?
Yeah, and then there's this, and it's also the part of the reason I think this book feels so tense in comparison. It's not just, you know, will their relationship survive this kind of like attempted separation, but also like, do they actually have any control over whether they're allowed to stay together?
Yeah.
Because that's the sort of from the first chapter, that's kind of the thing that I think really struck me about Lawrence's anger in this, is it's that helpless rage of knowing that you can't fix this. This is out of your control. There's nothing you can say or do that will convince anybody that they're doing something awful to you or that they should care that they are.
And the only people who get it are equally as powerless as you.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Temeraire, who is a dragon with the divine wind. But there's this one bit in the middle, there's this one sort of period where spoiler alert, he's evil. The brother to the Emperor is sort of courting Temeraire by telling him all about China and teaching him Chinese and teaching him like poetry and stuff. And Temeraire's like, oh, this is great. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Oh my God, I'm going to And Lawrence is like, I can't possibly be churlish about this because it's bringing him so much joy, but also, oh God, I'm going to lose him.
Yeah.
And at a couple of points, he also says, like, the only thing he has left to lose is Temeraire. Like, he has nothing else left to lose.
Lawrence is so selfless. He cares so deeply about Temeraire. And I think it's one of the most beautiful things about this book, actually. Like, on reflection, as much as I'm like, oh my God, the boat. Oh my God, the boat. There's a lot of self-reflection on Lawrence's part.
Yes.
From what he knows because he is a very late into the stage aviator, so he's not grown up around it. So he's kind of moved from the Navy where he grew up, and the first book kind of is, I guess, a comparison between his time in the Navy and his time with the aviators. And so the aviators have women, the Navy doesn't. He has to get over his sort of preconceived notions about that, and he mentions that in this
and like
book.
The casualness that they treat
the
each other. They don't stand in rank.
And the fact that he's not allowed to duel people if they're rude to him, and like there's all this kind of.
And so he's kind of like a bit of a go-between between the aviators and the Navy on the boat. Yes. But then you've also got the juxtaposition of Hammond, the ambassador, and
the awful ambassador.
Oh God, he's annoying. Him
so annoying.
And the Chinese delegation. And then also like the interaction of the Chinese delegation and all the sailors and the aviators, because they've all got conflicting different points of view compared to each other. So it's a very interesting dynamic. Like you say, Em, there's a lot going on in the boat, and at the same time, nothing happens.
I tell you what, I do think, I will say this to you. Once we get further in, you are going to want to go back and reread the boat bit, Another thing I noticed on a reread was the boat bit is full of surprise tools that will help us later.
Okay.
There is so much setup for the rest of the series happening in the boat bit.
Which is quite good, because I went and read like the sort of not the plot, the whole plot summary, but like of the future books in the series. I'm like, oh, this boat is like the boat that they take to all the other places that they go to in the series. And I'm like, it's quite an interesting way of opening up this world, because in the first book it is just the Napoleonic Wars, which I feel a lot of people, I mean, like, would either know of it just through, not pop culture, is that the wrong thing, but just like know of it
in passing
sort of
thing.
Cultural osmosis.
Osmosis, and you have like the dragon insert in there, and then this through the medium of the boat and the boat going places and the boat not doing very much, they go to different ports, and there's like a sort of discussion of like history and world building, but also plus dragons. And so it's quite an interesting juxtaposition, because as a historical fantasy novel, I feel like there's parts when they're in China, which I really like the bits when they were in China, going through the city and looking at the different ways that dragons were used like buses. And there were like dragons who, they were all sort of independent, they had their own minds, they had to pass exams, they were very
they had jobs,
like they were not used as tools or pets, for want of a better word. They're
pretty much like full citizens.
Yeah, full citizens.
Or like a lot closer to that.
And that's a complete contradiction to what we've seen before in London. And then the flip side of that is that there are very poor dragons in this environment as well. And there was like a homeless dragon eating some sort of like half bad sheep or something.
He wants to get like the cow, and he can only afford the rat.
And it's just it was a very clever use of fantasy writing to sort of bring that to the forefront, I thought.
It's there's a lot of kind of very complicated, like, and interesting kind of cultural stuff happening. I agree with you. I think the China bit is a lot easier to read, because it's kind of, there's a mix of this sort of, things are moving a bit faster, I think, but also there's like, weirdly, it's almost less tense, I think, because they're not stuck, there isn't this constant kind of like, we have to tread the lines between all of our respective roles really, really carefully.
Yeah.
Also,
or
the
this whole ship's
anticipation
going
is
to go
over.
up.
Because so much of it has been the anticipation of when we get there, what's going to happen.
And at least to start with, it's mostly just, wow, this is a beautiful country. Wow, look at all the different ways that things work here. Look at there's the different countryside and the language and the people that we see and the things that they believe. And I don't know, I think that bit's really, that bit's, in some ways, it's a lot less
in some ways
stressful.
it's presented as like a utopia. And obviously that's not entirely true. Yeah. But like, I'm interested to see when I read the rest of these books, because what I did was I went on Aid Books and I bought like as many as I could find.
Yeah.
Of the rest of the series. I'm interested to see if and how that gets deconstructed and played with, because I don't think Naomi Novik is going for this is how it's supposed to, this is uncritically how it's supposed to be. But it is so much better for dragons than Britain.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, it's got its own stuff going on, like the whole, on the one hand, it's great that all the women in the Chinese aerial corps, it's all women. But the reason, yay, girl power and all that, but the reason that it's all women is because
women are more expendable.
Being in the army, being in the military generally is like, oh, this is a thing that we don't want to spend our sons on. We don't want to waste men on this. So it's we're sort of fobbing off our unneeded daughters on military work, essentially, which is not exactly, hashtag girl power.
No, yeah.
And there's still the kind of, I think we get hints of that there might be, particularly there's more strictures maybe on Temeraire than there would be on your average Chinese citizen dragon in terms of like what he's allowed to do.
Yes, because he is special.
And like the way other dragons treat him.
Yeah, he is an outsider there still.
Yeah. And he would remain so even if there were like, there's plenty of Imperials and a few other Celestials he can spend time with, but he's never going to be a normal dragon citizen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's talking about the world opening up. So there's a lot of, as you were saying, Lottie, it's very Napoleonic Wars focused in the first book. And then we get like what, as you were saying, the boat journey allows us to get. So we get introduced to, oh, hey, slavery is still a thing in this world, in this fantasy world. Hey, here's some fun colonialist attitudes about, oh, nobody lives in the heart of Africa. There's nobody there. We get the kind of like, oh, maybe there's something, you know, maybe we're going to really start diving in on the fact that dragons in Britain don't have rights at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very subtle that you have, like, the slaves, they put in a slaver port and there's slaves in chains being sort of forcibly moved around and shot at and all sorts of things. And then not that long after, there's a big storm on the boat and it's big enough that they need to like lash Temeraire down to the dragon deck and like put a big tarp over him basically and cover it in chains. And so, and he's like, are you gonna let me go after this? I don't want to be chained up. Because he's just seen that humans will do that to each other, let alone dragons, you know.
Yeah.
And it's him realizing he is a slave.
Yeah. And I think that is partially why I think the book, the boat and the China bit balance each other, is because we spend that whole long journey finding out things like, oh, well, there's giant sea serpents will try and eat you, and they might be as intelligent as people, but people are always going to fire guns first and ask questions later. To be fair, like, she did eat people. She did eat people.
It wasn't just like she poked her head up and was friendly and inquisitive. Like, she did eat people.
Like, I don't actually necessarily think they did anything, like, I don't know what else they really could have done in that situation. Yeah. Howsoever, it is, it still points to the wider trend that I'm talking about, which is the kind of opening up the world and the discussion. Because it opens the way for Lawrence.
Like, Temeraire is completely natural that he would then be very conflicted about having killed this dragon who, by her own lights, wasn't doing anything wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of, and it introduces this sort of like, okay, so do you need to speak in order to not be summarily murdered? What makes you a person who can be, what makes you a person versus what makes you an animal? Like, what
makes you a person to the British Empire?
Yeah, specifically, yeah. And I mean, there's also like, there's I think a courier that we meet that's a dragon from Canada, with an indigenous rider. And they talk about them being kind of like grumpy to be part of the formation or whatever. And it's like, well, fucking yeah, they presumably don't want to be here. Like, you know, but there's all these kind of like, and you know, the East India Company has a fairly major role for the first time, and they bring up the idea of like British opium smugglers. There's all of this stuff that we know from our world that is like, oh, okay, we are in a fucked up, it is the fucked up colonial era that, you know, that's this behind all of our beloved Austins and, you know, Bridgerton and shit.
Well, I mean, and we just did Mansfield Park where, you know, slavery is touched on, and one of the adaptations makes a much bigger thing of that as a point of discussion.
But yeah, sorry, where I was originally going with this, instead of just like, you know, listing all of the things in the boat bit, but I think that makes the China bit more powerful because we've seen all of this. And, you know, the book is definitely not saying that the way the Chinese do it is perfect, but in contrast to this long slog of a sea voyage where all of these things have gone wrong, where we've been forced to reckon with a lot of very uncomfortable truths about like the world that Lawrence has been part of his whole adult life, and the world that Temeraire has no choice but to be a part of, and then to go into this completely different system. I think it's a very, in some ways, you know, it's a very well balanced. You know, there's the coup de grace at the end of the like, oh, it doesn't have to be like this, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I really liked. The other world thing, you remember how to make sentences with
all words.
I used to be able to do that. I was very good at it.
Dear listeners, we are all so tired. Not for any, like, particular reason, just it's February as of recording, and boy, it's February. It
sure is Februarying. But yeah, the other world building thing I wanted to bring up with you guys was I really felt this time, and I was being more of a lazy reader the first time around, but something that really struck me with this one was all of the Regency research, all of the Napoleonic Wars research, all of the like the basic stuff of living details. You know, like they're talking about, you know, Lawrence, you know, how filthy the streets in London are and how that gets on Lawrence's clothes and, like what kind of food people serve and like the way people react to the way Roland behaves. So some fun gender stuff in the first bit, but just also like the phrases, you know, like the way that everybody talks is so, and all of the details about like which kind of anchor the boat has and all of this. I don't know. I was very impressed. I was kind of awed by the amount of research that had gone into it and how real and textured it felt.
No, I agree with that. It felt very real. I think that's like credit to Naomi Novik and her research into this. Like it feels like a well-researched book. I'm not a scholar of Napoleonic Wars or anything, but it feels like of the time. Given we've read Austen, which is of that time, it like I think we mentioned in our Mansfield Park episode that, you know, we like to say, oh, which of our Austen heroines would what dragon would they fly if they were in the A-rated course? Because it slots in that well. Like it feels so part of that world.
What I don't know at all is how much that's also true of like what China was up to at this time and like how much we actually know about that. Like what, you know, we've got lots of like records and stuff from, you know, the early 1800s in the UK. But I don't know how much we have of that with China because, or even if they were as isolationist then as China is in these books.
That's a good point.
I have absolutely no knowledge of that because, you know, ignorant English person.
Off the top of my head, I think the kind of like, the sort of, I'm pretty sure we have the information because I think one of the things that is accurate is the amount of like the bureaucracy and like the idea of this kind of gargantuan civil service and the civil service exams. I have seen
when they're taking all the supplies off the boats and somebody is just like tallying it all up and like making sure that it gets where it's going.
Yeah. And like some of the costumes that they described, I've seen on sea dramas from
nice.
Like, which I mean, also aren't necessarily like massively chronologically. But I'm pretty sure. I personally do not know anything about 800s China, but I'm pretty sure we have that. We have that information. I'm pretty sure it's not a gap, massive gap in the record. But yeah, no, it is a book that makes you want to go and read more about the stuff it brings up. You know, the real world stuff. You want to. It's like the best kind of AU fanfic in that way, where you sort of want to go, oh, I can see what it is from canon that you're kind of playing with there, and like that kind of very, for want of a nail, meticulous, mechanical kind of, you know.
like you know, dropping a stone into the middle of a puddle and seeing the ripples that it makes. It's like I want to know what the puddle was like before Naomi Novik dropped the stone, so that I can better appreciate what she's doing.
Well, I think both of they're going to sort of back enrich each other, aren't they? They're both the sort of parallel strands of.
Which I think is something great about historical fantasy. It kind of opens up this opportunity for us as readers to learn something new about a historical context that you may not necessarily know anything about due to you just never been touched on in your schooling or for whatever reason. And so then it gives you a springboard to go and do more research, which is...
I'll tell you what felt new to me. It's not that I didn't know it per se, but a lot of what we've read that's set in this time, so like mostly Austen, a lot of that is set in a fairly small geographical area, like, you know, cities that would take a day to ride between. And so you never have this thing of like people are out of contact with each other for months at a time because they're halfway across the world, whereas that's most of this book. Is, you know, this is the last time Lawrence will get to send letters, this is the last time Lawrence will receive letters before he's in China, and like travel times on the orders of months, not just for ships with dragons on, but for couriers, like carrying mail. And so they don't know what's going on in Europe while they're in China because the news simply has not reached them. And that's interesting and impacts the plot in various ways.
Yeah. I mean, that was another thing about the boat bit was I think possibly from, you know, again, the cultural osmosis and from Austen, I guess, a little bit, there's kind of this sense of like this time period as being quite genteel and quite, we think about it as, it's comedies of manners. We think about, you think about the like fancy costumes and the cutting people dead with a look kind of thing. It's all very
sort of
air quotes civilized. Yeah. And then particularly the boat bit, but I think in other bits of this as well, you really come brought up against how difficult life actually was and how awful some of these things that are normalized are. Like all of the kind of horrific injuries that people get, not from sea serpents, just in the normal course of, we're in a navy vessel that's at war. And
half of them get malaria at one point,
Or, that's another, fun detail, just like
which, to be fair, is also, still very much a problem in today's world.
Although getting less and less all the time. Did you know that they've got vaccines now for some of them?
Hell yeah.
Which is fucking wild.
That is so cool. I love vaccines. I love to be vaccinated. The autism's just a bonus.
I remember reading about, for geography when I was a teenager, that people thought we were never going to get one. It was one of those things, it was like holy grail shit when I was a teenager. And now we have working vaccines for malaria. How fucking buck wild is that? Anyway, not to go off on a massive one about malaria. There's a past special interest, if you can believe that. But yeah, just I felt really I viscerally sort of got, and even things like Lawrence sets off for China with a concussion and a knee injury, and how long that takes to be fixed, and how awful that is. And Granby getting a fever and Granby's basically not in it for the first half of the sea voyage because he gets wounded in the first battle and then has a fever for just how long people are sick and how easy it is for them to die and also to just receive horrific injuries. There's one kid that gets a splinter through his whole jaw. There's there's just a sharp slit of wood through his whole face.
And he just keeps trucking.
Yeah. And you think this would have been normal, presumably, that's just how difficult it was to be in the Navy at that time period. And you sort of, I'd kind of intellectualized that a bit.
People get splintered a lot, actually, in this book.
Well, yeah, because that's how, spoilers alert, that is how the main antagonist dies.
Nobody actually kills him exactly.
Yeah, which I'd
nobody
forgotten.
has to be on the hook for killing him. He just dies because of splinters from a structure collapsing because the two dragons are fighting. Politically, that's very handy, is that nobody killed him.
And it enhances that sense of this being... having that tragedy thing of it being need against need against need. There's all of these people with their very kind of mostly valid. I'm still not 100% convinced. I think Yongxing should have been in charge of who got to be the next emperor. But what do I know? I'm only a window cleaner. But the thing that makes him complicated, of course, is that he stuck by Lien. He gave up the throne.
Well, she wasn't even his dragon, right? Well, I mean, okay, officially she wasn't his dragon, but we know that that's not how it works. But he gave up the throne to be the companion to the cursed dragon who has got albinism and therefore is spooky and unnatural.
Yeah. Which, okay, I nothing that he does that whole book makes you think, oh, this is a person that I could... I mean, Lawrence talks about it quite a lot because he's doing that Lawrence thing where he's desperately trying to be fair. So he keeps looking for common ground and just feeling like he cannot find it right up until they find out how Lien ended up with Yongxing. And then it's okay, I get it now. He's not a totally irredeemable shitbag. There is something valuable.
But also he didn't have to be doing all that.
He also didn't have to be doing all of that. It's true. None of the scheming for the throne stuff seemed particularly... Although, I mean, not to, sort of bring real world history into this for a second, I'm not necessarily sure that he's wrong about the whole, hey, maybe we should stop letting Westerners in, considering, the Opium Wars.
What we typically do when we go abroad, yeah.
Yeah. Historically speaking, they had good reason to not want us around.
Exactly.
I cannot blame them. I cannot blame him, necessarily.
But he also did try to kill our boy, a lot of times, so we don't like it.
He did try and kill our boy so many fucking times. Which also, can I say, I love fucking oblivious Lawrence. The first murder attempt, he, A, doesn't realise it's a murder attempt, and then B, rescues his murderer because he thinks he's about to fall overboard, and he's, jumped into him on accident.
Yeah.
Like, bless his cotton socks.
He's sort of bumbling around, refusing to be killed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the thing we should talk about, actually, just how much I really love Lawrence in this book. We got so many more, like, fun character bits for Lawrence.
Yeah.
And that was a
like,
fun
I really
bit of
liked
development.
Him navigating, being on the boat that is captained by the guy who he handed over the captaincy in the first book to, Riley. And he's written to him to be like, hey, we've got this dragon transport that we're going to be going on to China and nobody wants to crew it. Do you want to? Because, you know, you're new to this and it will be a pretty good job and we can hang out.
Yeah.
And him navigating being not the captain and sort of understanding exactly what Riley's job is and trying to support him even when they disagree.
Or when it comes in conflict with like what he needs to do, what he owes to the Aerial Corps or to Temeraire. Yeah, no, I enjoyed
like him
that.
navigating those sort of personal and professional obligations, and then his professional ones are also personal.
No, it's a good time. I was enjoying. There were a couple of bits. There were a few bits that made me sort of like my heart hurt for him a little bit in this book, and one of them was I realized, I think about the time of the siege in the pavilion, I realized that he knows all of their names.
Yes.
Like every single person that dies, even if we've never spoken to them before, we've never heard their name before, he knows them by name. Even if we only find that out, mostly we find that out by them dying.
Yeah.
So here's a fun character thing for Will Lawrence, is that he does know everybody on that boat. He knows everybody on that dragon. Like, oof!
Yes.
And we know he feels it. You know, when they die.
One of his 12-year-old, the runners dies.
Yes.
Like, he goes, Roland, will you and Morgan go and do this? And she goes, Morgan's dead.
Yeah. And he has to write the letter to his mum, being like, he was a great kid. What can you possibly say? So there was that, and there was there's a moment where he finds out that Temeraire taught all the other dragons in his formation.
Oh my god, brilliant!
Steal how to steal sheep.
That was quite
the Dover
excellent.
Covert, and it turns out
is
that
it stealing?
once
That's their sheep.
Yeah,
you
no,
know?
he's like, listen, Temeraire's right, and he should say it. But he lets slip that once he and Maximus accidentally let all the sheep out, and then had to go flying around catching them all and putting them back. And Lawrence.
So
like, absolutely, it doesn't I don't think it actually even says that Lawrence is laughing. Temeraire goes, well, I don't think it's that funny. And the narration goes, Lawrence tried desperately to catch his breath, you know. And like, he keeps losing it. He's trying so hard, and then he keeps losing it. But everybody's looking at him in astonishment because he's laughing. And then you just go, oh my god, Lawrence, when was the last time you were like happy in front of your friends? Like, holy shit,
the thing is
dude.
that, like, especially on this voyage, he is really alone, apart from Temeraire and maybe Granby, because nobody else is his equal, right? Except for when the other dragon captains are there, because they come to, they're the cavalry when they get attacked by the French.
And even people that are sort of rank equivalent in, like, I mean, because Riley is to an extent, but like...
Yeah, but he doesn't get it.
Yeah,
know?
There's nobody, there aren't any other aviators there. There's nobody who understands...
Everyone's like, well, of course you don't want to be separated from Temeraire because he's such an asset to the British Army.
Yeah.
And Lawrence is like, I don't want to be separated from Temeraire because he's my best friend. Like, what, you know.
That's my soulmate you're talking about.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
off.
Yeah, and there's no other dragon captains.
And then the only other guy there is Hammond, who's being so annoying.
Although, I'm given to understand that there are people on the boat who will later become dragon captains.
I couldn't possibly comment.
I may have read some spoilers.
I also may have read some spoilers, and it excites me greatly.
Yeah. Oh, man. Somebody's got a big storm coming. That's all I'm going to On a light-hearted note, I had a question for you guys. It's a new one. Are you ready? Which of the characters in this book would it be funniest to make watch Bridgerton?
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh. Like, Yongqing, because I want him to suffer. I like Bridgerton, to be clear. I like Bridgerton. I've watched it. I enjoyed it very much. Yeah. It is fluff in a lot of ways, and it would be incomprehensible to him.
Yeah.
And I feel like that would be funny to me.
See, I kind of, on the one hand, I'm sort of like, I think it would be funny to make Riley watch it, because given his reaction to finding out that there are women in the aerial corps, which is basically like, why don't we just let sluts run all over our boats?
He's a defender of slavery, and the whole premise of, well, not the whole premise of Bridgerton, but one of the things about Bridgerton is, hey, we have, like, racially integrated society, or at least high society.
Yeah. He would have an apoplexy, and I think that's very funny. I think he deserved it. He earned it. To
be fair, Bridgerton the TV show, I think Bridgerton the books.
Yeah. He should be absolutely destroyed by the knowledge that some people, this is entertainment.
Temeraire watching it and asking really awkward questions.
So that's another bit. Thinking of comedy bits in this book, I really enjoyed. There's a moment where Temeraire, it turns out, does not know where babies come from, and he goes, "You do not hatch out of eggs?" he asked in deep fascination. "How then? I beg your pardon, I think I see Purbeck looking for me," Riley said very, what does that say? Very hastily, and escaped at a speed remarkable, Lawrence thought somewhat resentfully, in a man who had lately consumed nearly a quarter of his own weight again in food. And it's just like, Riley's like, I'm not explaining babies to this fucking dragon, I refuse.
Yep, that's not my job. I
am not doing that. Like, someone else can do that, not me. Sorry. No.
With the attitude of me handing back the child that I'm looking after to their parents, you know?
Like, nope.
You know what? That's one for the parents to deal with. I'm gonna go and be like
Lawrence is also like, it's complicated, I don't want to talk about it.
It's like, no, we cannot discuss.
I feel like most of the aerial corps would watch Bridgerton and be like, this is kind of fun. Is this really how groundlings behave? This is hysterical. I love this. They've got a curious anthropological kind of like, all right, vibe about it. Lawrence is turning redder than the reddest red thing. Is like he's going to spontaneously combust. He's sitting there making a high-pitched whistling noise like a kettle that's about to go off. He's having the worst fucking time. And then Temeraire is going to ask him questions.
Yep.
that would be quite comical.
It's a good time. Speaking of which, how do we feel about the third act reveal that Temeraire missed the whole, battle because he was too busy fucking?
Weird. I feel very weird about it because he's a baby. That's a child, sir. I know he's not. He's like a full-grown adult.
It's like I knew that. I knew him when he was an egg, and therefore he's not allowed to grow up and have sex. There should be laws against this sort of thing.
I assume at some point there will be Temeraire eggs and also Lawrence children in this series, because that's part of what was discussed in the first book, is that, you gotta have kids if you're an aviator so that your dragon has somebody that they're more likely to bond with when you die, because you will predecease your dragon.
Yeah.
And I kind of assume that Lawrence will have kids with Jane Rowland, because she clearly doesn't hate the idea of having kids, because she's got one, and they get on well.
Yeah, I like their relationship.
And, would be decent co-parents, I feel. But, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did find it in my head it's sort of like How to Train Your Dragon 3, where the dragon has dragon babies. Yes, there's 3 of them, and the third one has dragon babies.
Oh, I've only seen the first 2. Clearly I'm missing out.
And basically that's all I want to happen in the book is Temeraire to be a dad and having to go to Lawrence to be like, hey, can you help? And he's like, look, I also or they can have children at the same time and then have to help each other with child rearing.
But the thing is that dragonettes don't need a lot of raising by other dragons. They need socializing, right? But they don't need. They emerge from the egg ready to hunt, pretty much, or ready to be given food and talking and stuff, as long as they've been spoken to in the egg and know the language, right?
Yeah.
And in the case of Celestials and maybe Imperials, they can remain good at learning languages throughout their lives. But it's not in this book, Temeraire meets his mum. But she's not she's not maternal in the sense of oh, here's my baby, I'm going to give him cuddles. She's maternal in the sense of I've got stuff to teach you.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that you are an adequate dragon.
Yeah. Which I think is going to be a fun contrast when we get to, because we do get to see later in the series dragons interacting with their offspring. I'm not going to tell you anything except that it's hysterically funny. That's all you're getting from me.
All right.
Can we ask some more fun questions about this book? Because I feel that we got a lot of time out of this for book one. Gaslight, Gatekeep, Girlboss. Which character best embodies these? All mansplain, manipulate, male wife. I feel we could do both for this. Can we do both for this book?
Is Lawrence gaslighting himself into believing it actually was a ghost and nobody's trying to murder him? Because he does sort of get a bit like, maybe I imagined it. Maybe I imagined it after a while. He'd had a long day. He's like, maybe it was a ghost. Maybe nobody tried to kill me. Maybe he hit me with a crowbar because he was like trying to help me with the crowbar.
Like as a friend, you know?
I often hit people with crowbars as friends. What do you mean?
I mean, Gatekeep has to be like the Chinese embassy being like, you can't have this dragon, right? Well, I'm sure there are other examples of gatekeeping.
The Admiralty, the non-dragon Admiralty, conniving with the Chinese embassy to split Lawrence and Temeraire up. I think there is a moment early on where like half of Lawrence's crew nearly commits treason to like stop that admiral from like arresting Lawrence and like getting eaten by Temeraire basically. And eventually when like the prince is like, well just send Lawrence along, fine, fuck, I'll kill him on the way, I don't care. And the admiral's just like, you like fucking take him. Get him out of my sight. God. I'm so done with this man. Like it's fucking hysterical.
And then Lawrence ends up getting adopted by the Emperor of China. Like, I love the idea of the title card. You know, like the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia title cards?
Yes.
Like, the gang gets into whatever. And it's like, Lawrence becomes the adopted son of the Emperor of China.
Can you imagine him writing that letter back to his dad?
I'm sure we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah.
Hey, so funny thing happened in China. So I'm now the adopted son of the emperor. Joke.
The funniest thing happened on my gap year.
I was going to say, I went on a gap year.
Can you imagine being that admiral, though, when Lawrence gets back? He's been
you sent this guy away and it's some sort of, Uriah Gambit where you hope that he dies so you don't have to deal with him anymore.
Yeah, you're so fucking done with him. You hope he gets murdered. He's gone halfway around the world.
And instead he comes back.
And he's like,
come back more powerful than you could ever imagine.
He solved your trade treaty problems and he's also been adopted by the Emperor of China. So you can't say, anything.
We talk about failing
so
upwards.
Funny.
Jesus.
Yeah. I feel like Girlboss is Yung Tian Lien, right?
Yeah, probably.
The albino dragon.
Yeah.
Who I'm sure will come back and cause problems on purpose.
Yeah. Because
why wouldn't you? These people killed your guy.
Oh boy.
Even if your guy kind of sucked, he was good to you, you know? So.
Yeah. I can say nothing.
My hope for her is that Temeraire wins her over by just being a decent person and, not being shit to her because she's an albino. But we'll find out. I will find out because I have all these books now.
It's, Yeah, no, I think that's a good candidate for Girlboss. Side note on the Girlboss thing, I also really enjoyed, there's a moment, I think, at the first pavilion they stop at in China, where there's loads of other dragons and there's loads of other aviators around. The first time Lawrence meets one of the Chinese military aviators, he has a massive, it's a panicked moment for him because it's a very sleepy, it's somebody who's clearly not a morning person. This young woman has just walked topless into the central courtyard of this pavilion.
And yelling at her dragon.
Who's then knocked her in the lake to wake her up. And that was just such a beautiful moment. I'm like, I want to know about that woman. I want a whole novel about being in the Chinese aerial corps. I'm so intrigued by all of that.
The Chinese don't do a lot of fighting in the sense of they're quite isolationist. They have their empire and they are just managing their empire. They're not, getting involved in European affairs or anything. So I don't know how much the aviators. I don't know what the life of a Chinese aviator looks like, and I hope we will get to see that later.
Yeah. Okay, so mansplain, manipulate, male wife. I think Hammond is mansplain. Probably.
Yeah,
sure.
Totally agree.
I don't think anybody's really succeeding at manipulating here. Lots of people are trying. It's probably Yongxing, isn't it?
Yeah. He very nearly gets away with it, too, if it hadn't been for these pesky kids, you know?
So that's pretty solid.
I used to be a manipulator until I took a splinter to the eye. And then male wife is Lawrence, right?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Obviously. I do picture him, I think I said this to Em a while ago, I do picture him as, like, young Russell Crowe from Master and Commander, which I haven't actually seen, I should.
No.
Is it the same Russell Crowe as in Gladiator? Is that Russell Crowe?
So in Master and Commander, he's, like, blonde and has, it's the same time period, and he's like the ship's captain. So
okay. Maybe I need to watch that for context.
I think it would be not unreasonable to think that that's also the mental image that Naomi Novik had writing this character.
I mean, she has written an awful lot of Master and Commander fan fiction. So
why are we not reading this?
I mean, let's say there are books. There are Master and Commander books. We could do those for the podcast.
Oh yeah. And lots of people that I know really like them.
This is probably going to be a really obvious question, but like, who would you fight?
Hammond.
See, I wouldn't, and I'll tell you why. Because it turns out he's actually quite good at it. Like when they do the siege thing, like
yes,
he's been very annoying. He's been kind of a shit the whole time. Like, to be fair, desperately trying to do his job, but also just like putting his foot in it left, right, and center.
The worst. Yeah.
But when the metal meets the meat, he is like, give me a cutlass, I'll sort this. And he does, and I have to give him mad props for that. I wouldn't fight him. I do think he's...
That's fair enough.
I would be quite rude to him,
the admiral
probably,
who's
sometimes.
trying so hard to get rid of Lawrence.
Yes.
Him,
I'm like, I am going to... The thing, I keep wanting to say Lenton, but it isn't. I'm pretty sure
it's not Lenton. Lenton's nice.
Lenton's the dragon one.
Aviator.
I cannot remember. He doesn't deserve us to remember his name. He's that much of a shit stain.
No, this is true.
He's that awful, he can sod off.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know who I'd fight. Whoever starts the fight on the boat. Like the kid who starts the fight.
Oh, yeah, and then he's being a cocky
Reynolds.
shit about it because nobody's dueling him.
Yeah,
and
that
it's
guy.
Because they don't know that the aerial corps isn't allowed to duel them.
Yeah.
So there's this whole little byplay of like him thinking he's gotten away with something, and Lawrence not really wanting to punish his guys because they're not in the wrong, but also, and it would have been worse if they hadn't.
I think he's one of the ones who gets eaten by the sea dragon.
Oh no!
Oh, so he gets
so
his
sad.
That's also sad.
I know, so sad. Because Reynolds.
Who is in the Muppets adaptation of this book the only human?
So Lawrence is Kermit, right? I feel.
Yeah. I can see
I
that.
kind of want to say Hammond.
Oh, he's so like fish out of water with like absolutely nobody gets on with him in this book. He is totally on his own.
Yeah.
Mostly through his own like being a shithead. But like, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Alternately, like the Emperor who we meet once.
Yeah. There's some good options. I think it's tricky though. I mean, it's always, I think, tricky when you have like fantasy animals.
Because are they Muppets or are they themselves?
I don't think this is like... I feel the Muppets adaptations are better for sort of classical literature.
Yeah.
It's Muppets where you wouldn't think Muppets ought to be.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Whereas a dragon Muppet isn't anything.
It's less surprising to have Muppets in the Dragon book.
It'd be like, that would be a fun question for Jane Eyre when we get round to that book.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Like,
oh man, Jane Eyre is going to be a trip.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I trying to think what are other fun questions. My brain has gone. Have we done them all? No, we can't have gone through them all.
I don't think we've done them all, but I think we have done a respectable amount. And given that we're under the hour, we could start wrapping up and then Ro wouldn't beat us with hammers.
Well, we also do need to have an extensive period of time to discuss the cat rating of this book.
It's true.
That book one was the first book to get the 10 out of 10 on the cat rating.
I don't know if this gets the same, is the thing.
Yeah. See, on the one hand, okay, I think it's got a lot of the strengths of the first one. Dragons is cats.
It has less whimsy.
Yes, that's the thing. I think I would take it down a point for being not so shenanigan-y, you know?
Yeah.
Like, lots of people get stabbed. There's lots of backstabbing. There's lots of crimes. There's schemes. There's ghosts.
But also Temeraire does not get to do what he wants so much more than in the last book.
Yes. Yes, that's very
it's
true.
Sort of, I think,
she would hate being like have a tarp put over her and chains put over it.
Yeah,
yes.
she would get quite, I think, frustrated by that. Like she wants, Lyriel level of cats in the book, or Temeraire, where Temeraire is just like being badass, the center of the novel. And Temeraire is still the center of the novel, and I think it does push up the cat rating.
He's a cat that's had the unfortunate understanding that politics applies to him.
Yeah, and then
sort of forcibly what's it into his brain.
Gothmog does not have that understanding, and therefore I think she would not be able to like get on with that aspect of this book. She just doesn't understand it. Yeah.
I'm thinking 8 or a 9. How does that sound?
I'm thinking 8.5. 8.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm happy with that.
I feel a fair 8.5.
This is, I mean, it's an easy 10 from me, even though I think, it's a harder book to read than the first one, but I think it's also a very, very good book. Yeah.
It's so much less joyful, but that's because this is Naomi Novik popping the hood and going, okay, now let's see what this world is really about.
Yeah.
Like,
what's underneath all the Austen and the shenanigans and the English-centric kind of... Yeah.
Like, it's meaty.
Let's see what worms are eating at the rind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very good book. Heartily recommend. Speaking of good books...
I mean, I started reading the next one already.
Excellent.
And I get to meet the best boy. The
Sarkay!
best character, the best guy.
My love!
Yes. Yeah.
My favourite boy.
So far I haven't seen that much of him, but I know that I love him. And that he's the only sane guy in this world.
Yeah. He's so done with everybody's shit.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. What have I been reading? Honestly, the main thing that I have read this week that I would want to recommend to our dear listeners is that fanfic I sent to you.
Yes.
I wrote down the name so I could be a proper...
Like, I'm not by and large a Buck Tommy person. I am canon buddy truther. I've never watched an episode of this show.
Oh. Talking about 911, yeah.
Yeah. But it was very good. It was very heartwarming. It was local gay finds gay community.
Yeah, it's very, and it's like, it's very queer. It's an incredible, so it's a fanfic for, let's get it all out. Fanfic for 911, for a pairing that was canon and has since broken up, but it's a fix-it for them breaking up. It's called Won't You Come By and See Me, I'm a Love Letter Away by Dharma Avocado, who, if you haven't read any of their work previous, run, don't walk. Go read everything they've ever written because it's fucking incredible. But it's both a ship manifesto and a fix-it and a kind of like, here is the soft queer epilogue we could have actually, and maybe it's going to hurt you to get there, but it's going to be worth it. You know? Oh man, I don't have the words. I was in tears. I finished it. I was in tears. Read this fic.
Can you put the link and I'll put it on the newsletter?
Yes, I will. It will go on the reference post.
Excellent.
In classic form. How about you, Lottie? What have you been reading?
What have I? I mean, to be honest, I've watched the series 3 Wheel of Time trailer about a gazillion times. So
I still haven't. I've got to do that.
Please do, and then tell me your thoughts. Yes. And then I started listening to Jane Eyre, and I'm like, well, this is a Bronte book. And then my second thought was, I read this when I was 11, and I don't know how much that says about my childhood experience.
I mean, I think I was also about 11 the first time I read it.
I feel like between this, Animal Farm, and what was the other one? Because I was looking through my book, and I think I read Jane Eyre, Animal Farm, and Lord of the Flies.
That's a cocktail. That is. My goodness.
I didn't really appreciate like the opening to Jane Eyre. I'm like, well, this is Charlotte Bronte's going in quite hard with the. This ain't a romance book. This is
woman escapes her abusive family.
This is, right in your face, as the Brontes do very well, but it is very much in your face. So I have been listening to that, and then what else have I got? Have I got queued up on my Audible? I mean, to be honest, I've got more Discworld because I love listening to that. We're coming into springtime. That means I can go and plant some broad beans.
We're not that far from the glorious 25th of March, right?
May, yeah.
Oh, May, sorry, yeah.
And I can start planting some beans, and that means I can start listening to more Discworld whilst tending to my beans, because, you know, that's how I roll in my life.
We are a certified gardening podcast. Listen to us while you're doing your gardening and feel kinship with Lottie and her broad beans.
Yeah, exactly. I'll give broad beans updates when they start growing as we record. Be like, guys, we've got to shoot. But I think we need to wrap it up there. So thank you all so much for listening. If you've got this far and you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a like or a review on your podcast platform. It not only means the world to us, but it helps more listeners like yourselves find our podcast. And if you want to send us a book to recommend or just want to say hello, you can connect with us on all our socials or email us via our link on our website. So say hello, send us a message, and recommend us some books to read. Big virtual hugs, and we will see you next time. Bye!